What's up gamers, Moz here, welcome to Respawn. Straight off the bat, Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, it's a game. It's not a midget porno. Can you believe it? But it's actually based on the Borderlands 2 DLC, Tiny Tina's Assault on Dragon's Keep, which was an amazing DLC. But on the back of that success, Gearbox have decided to make a full release version, Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, and I'm so glad they did. We play as the Fate Maker, a customised, fully voiced character who's working their way across a Dungeons and Dragons table to defeat the evil Dragon Lord. We mostly play in the traditional Borderlands first-person view, and moving between levels we swap into an isometric overworld tabletop view. The visuals are the familiar Borderlands cel-shaded art style, which I've always been a fan of regardless of the setting, but it fits in beautifully in this fantasy world. The vibrancy of the nature and in a fantasy world as well, it does so much more for me compared to the dreary greys and browns of Borderlands 1 and 2 in particular. The foliage and some of the textures have a much crisper and more lifelike effect and blend really nicely with the comic book style, and I love that hand-drawn thick pencil outline of objects that contain textures with much more fidelity to them. It's definitely an improvement on the previous Borderlands art styles, and that was already pretty pleasing on the eye. Underneath these fantasy vibes though, it's still a Borderlands game. It's still running and gunning your way through a linear map, and Gearbox have sprinkled in some new abilities and leaned a little more into the necessity of melee and making use of magic, but was this enough to shake things up, and how stale is the simple looting and shooting formula becoming? I'm still really enjoying playing, but have they evolved enough? Have they added a game-changing feature like Doom Eternal did with the platforming, or Dying Light 2 with the paraglider, and that really complemented the game's verticality? Gearbox haven't really added anything mechanically significant. Now, there are some subtle changes that are based around the original formula of Borderlands, but they're not that big, and probably my favourite is the fact that we're now playing in the mind of an insane person. Like, Tiny Tina on a whim will completely change the whole map, disrupting the world and making drastic changes to the environment and the enemies you're facing off against, and this plays into the hands of the wacky Borderlands experience really well. The new spells are a decent change, and some of these are pretty cool. They're an alternative to the grenades basically from the previous Borderlands games though, so it's not exactly anything new or a new mechanic or anything like that, but the variety and the visual eye candy of some of these spells are so cool. There aren't as many enemy types as I'd hoped, considering this is a fantasy setting, because your imagination is pretty much the limit, but I was a big fan of the mushroom dudes as well, because these guys are clearly Super Mario's crack-addicted cousins who've narrowly avoided being fried and served into my full English breakfast. And a big shout out to Queen Butt Stallion's design as well, because this diamond encrusted unicorn is straight out of the mind of a spoiled little shit asking for a birthday present, and that's a little insight into Tiny Tina's warped mind. Then there's rings and amulets replacing the class mods and artifacts, a new buff slot that's another lootable item, and the dark magic spells that steal health, which again, these aren't anything new in a mechanical sense, but another example of more Borderlands and these RPG statistics being stuffed down my throat, and I love it. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not knocking the game for what's not here, but it felt like a missed opportunity, even though the intention here was to mix things up, try something new, and this intention is a little bit of a smokescreen that looks like a Dungeons and Dragons theme set in this gorgeous cel-shading fantasy world, but underneath it, it's still a running, gunning, and a shit ton of looting Borderlands game. Now, I'm more than okay with that, because it just so happens that I love Borderlands, and it's moorishly addictive looting and rainbow-coloured ejaculation of weapons erupting out of a falling corpse once you've put them down, then sifting through each weapon, studying the numbers, deciding whether it suits your build or not, and testing out your new goodies on some bitch-ass skeletons.
Oh, would you? I just made those skeletons.
Then to be pleasantly surprised that your new weapon sounds like Darth Vader's lawnmower, or you're the proud owner of a shotgun that's powered by sprinkling cocaine into the barrel, or holy shit balls, did my weapon just talk to me? Well, you can be my new therapist, this is so cool! But I still can't help but feel that it needed something fresh to be added to the first person experience. They did add some environmental traps here and there, which did spice things up a little, but there weren't that many of of them. The overworld though, this was a great design choice, and it's used to confine each linear level to a single hop in and hop out experience. I actually think this works in replacing the open world design with vehicles that were just shockingly bad to control in previous Borderlands games and were merely there for just as a means to get from A to B and mowing down a few enemies for some cheap XP, when it's so much more enjoyable to use my arsenal of weapons instead. Replacing vehicles with this top-down board game experience where we control a bobblehead playing piece of our character was so much more engaging than simply driving a clunky vehicle, and I thought this playful mode was a pretty cool addition. There's small paths to wander down, secrets to find, and random encounters warping me back into the first-person world inside an arena for a quick showdown with a chest that's waiting for me as a reward. It really complements the best bits about a Borderlands experience rather than getting in the way like I felt that the vehicles did. When it comes to your build, we've got 6 classes to choose from with some interesting playstyles. So you've got the Graveborn, focusing on dealing damage in exchange for health with a floating Demilick to summon. Then the Spore Warden's got a little mushroom dude companion and focused on range damage, whipping out a barrage as arrows as his special skill. The Berserker's focused on dealing frost damage and can enrage, dealing even more damage with his Dreadwind melee attacks. The Stabomancer reminded me a little of Zero with his camouflage skill, stealth and crit hit focus, but with a ghost blade instead of a sniper rifle. The Clawbringer focused on fire and lightning with a baby wyvern to wreak havoc and a beastly hammer to pummel enemies into dust, and this is who I went for. And then there's the Spell Shot, who's focused on casting magic and spell weaving. You can max out your character at level 40, but we don't stop there. Oh no. After level 40, you'll unlock the Myth ranks, which are 4 smaller skills trees that are split into 4 constellations. Druid for your companion damage, Archmage for spellcasting, Blade Master for melee, and Deadeye for gun damage. Now, each time you level up, you'll move on to the next quadrant in a clockwise motion. So, in other words, you'll be diversifying your points across all 4 quadrants, so you won't be able to focus solely on one. So even at level 40, the statistics and that RPG goodness just do not stop. But Muzz, that's just not enough. I need more. I hear you. Gearbox have got you covered, because after you complete the main storyline, you'll unlock the Chaos Chambers. Now, these are 3 dungeons that are randomized into 3 rooms, followed by a mini-boss, and then after you complete the mini-boss, you'll unlock 3 more rooms, followed by a big boss. Defeat that and you'll have a big juicy chest to unlock, and that is the test though. It's a huge skill check, and have you got the skills to pass the test?
Oh, you must pass the dungeon wisdom test.
So where's the writing heading in the Borderlands series? Borderlands 3 went for the twin influencer angle, doing its best to conform with modern society, and Tiny Tina's Wonderlands has definitely toned down the dark nature of its comedy that we saw in Borderlands 1 and 2, and I personally loved its comedy back then. I enjoyed the humour in Tiny Tina's Wonderlands too, but it felt a little watered down, because you just know that the Gearbox writers will have been doing their best to come up with a joke, but thanks to today's bullshit cancel culture, being on some mission to make everyone as fucking miserable as possible, that they'll have sat there gone, ha, that's a great joke. Oh, wait. Can I say that? Yes, you fucking can. Say it! Now, the voice acting meets the top draw standard of Borderlands once again, with first-class performances from Ashley Birch playing Tiny Tina, which is an insane transformation from the deadly serious performance of Aloy in Horizon, by the way, and other top-notch performances from comedy actors Will Arnett, Andy Samberg, and Wanda Sykes. It's no-holds-barred comedic voice acting, pushing the comedy angle to the maximum, and I really enjoyed it. The Borderlands game's enjoyment spikes when playing co-op though, and the same applies to Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. There's cross-play between PlayStation, Xbox and PC, which is nice, but there's a mix of local co-op options depending on your platform, with 2-player horizontal and vertical split screen available on PS4 and Xbox One. Then for the next-gen consoles it goes up to 4-player split screen, but over on PC there's no split screen at all. Split screen is probably not as sought after as it used to be, but I know there's people still out out there who sit down with their family and friends and they want to just obliterate some trash-talking monsters on the same TV. And there is something else that's a little annoying at the minute, and this Shift software that's used to cross-play. It's constantly popping up with a disconnection error message at the moment, which is a right pain in the arse, and even though I wasn't actually being disconnected, it still needs fixing. There's the same two co-op modes that we had in Borderlands 3, which is cooperation mode, which is where all the loot is shared between all the players and specific to your game. Then there's coopetition mode, which is where it's on a first come, first served basis, so everyone's sprinting to that loot and you can't allow your undeserving friend to get their grubby little mitts on your loot. The same goes for enemy scaling, where in cooperation the enemies will be scaled to your level, whereas in coopetition the enemies are scaled to the host. I'm not sure which sadistic bastards are playing on coopetition mode, but it's there if you want it. Performance wise, it was pretty solid. Playing at 4K on a 3090 with an i9, I was able to max out the settings and hit 60 to 70 FPS, but turning down the ambient occlusion from ultra to high gave me nearly an extra 20% FPS, so I recommend doing that. A few areas caused some drops, but no major stuttering or frame skips. The texture streaming took a little while to load in when entering new areas, but once they'd loaded in for the level, you're good to go until the next area. I had no crashes and one bug where an enemy froze and did a little dance for me, and that's about all I can speak of. The UI is a little wonky when using the mouse though, because the interactions aren't quite aligned correctly, and flicking between tabs and scrolling up and down is still really slow. It was the same in Borderlands 3, so Gearbox need to fix this basic menu stuff. In-game though, no problemos. And a shout out to the accessibility options, allowing to completely remove the camera shake and head bobbing. I'm a big fan of that. You've got around 20 hours of gameplay to complete the main storyline and even more to finish the side quests, which by the way are just as insane and crazily written as the main quest. And then there's the Chaos Chambers, and you completionists will be looking at around 50, maybe 60 hours to find all the audio logs, the lucky dice and marbles. I think Tiny Tina's Wonderlands is worth your time, especially if you're a Borderlands fan, but it is running the risk of becoming a little stale, and I'd like Gearbox to add something a little bit more significant mechanically. But this new fantasy setting and the overworld tabletop view, it was a really good addition, and for now this is still a good enough looter shooter and definitely worth your time, but it does need something new. Next time round I'd like to see that, but hit that subscribe button if you've enjoyed the video, and until then I'll see you in the next one.